right. Well, welcome everyone, and thank you for coming to our webinar, Remote Strategy and Decision Making. I'm Erin Courtney with Earthling Interactive, and your host will be walking you through today's webinar is Vince Rose. I'll tell you a little bit more about us in a minute, but first, I had planned to have people do a show of hands, but we're not a lot of video. People are deciding to go a little incognito, so we're not going to do a show of hands. So I'll just make an assumption. I think it's safe to make the assumption that we've all struggled through decision making, even prior to COVID, when we could all be in the same room. So with that challenge being sort of exasperated, um, we are looking at good tools, and we're going to talk about good tools and techniques for doing group decision making in a remote environment. But that's based on work that we do in an in-person environment. And in fact, we had started examining how we would put our process that we use at Earthling into a remote format prior to COVID. So this is work that we had started doing before it was required to be doing remote decision making. Um, to tell you a little bit about Earthling Interactive, we're a web development and web application development company, and we take a consultative approach to those services. And as such, the two most important parts of our business are one, obviously the programming and the coding that goes into building those products, but two, just as important, is that project management and leading teams through decision making so that we can build a product that the team and the organization that we're building for will be happy. So to that end, we put a lot of emphasis on our techniques around guiding the process. And Vince here is certainly one of our leaders in that area. And he's been doing this work for over 15 years. And he was, prior to being at Earthling, he was at the UW Madison in the Do It Lab. So he's been working with diverse stakeholders for a long time. So our goal when we're doing these decision-making strategy sessions is not necessarily to find a compromise or make sure that everybody's happy. It's to make sure that everyone shares the same expectations for what will happen throughout the process, because that's where things really start to go off the rails. If you're not being very consistent and careful about making sure what the group's expectations are, that's where problems happen, that's where overages happen, and that's where dissatisfied customers happen. So we have really put a lot of energy into finding effective decision-making strategies and implementing those throughout the process. What you're going to be looking at today with Vince is an example of how we kick off our projects with a robust decision-making process and some of the tools that Vince is using to do that. So again, I'm Erin Courtney. I'm the VP of Sales and Marketing here at Earthling Interactive. And Vince is a project manager at Earthling Interactive. And I'm going to turn, unless anybody has any questions before I turn it over to Vince, in which case feel free to unmute yourself, that's no problem, or to use chat. If you have questions during the course of Vince's presentation, feel free to chat them, and I'll be your liaison to interrupt Vince. So we talked about it ahead of time. We're both happy to do that. And if I don't see anybody chatting right now with a question, I'll just hand it directly right over to Vince.
All right.
All right.
Hi,
Take
everybody.
it away.
I hope everybody's doing okay. So like Erin said, I'm a project management supervisor and project manager here at Earthling Interactive. One of my responsibilities in kicking off a project is doing some strategy guidance and developing a product at the end so we know what the plan is going forward for implementation. As part of that job, I spend a ton of time in meetings, and they're all good meetings for sure. But there are a lot of meetings, and over the uh, course of the years, with experience of being in those meetings, I've kind of developed these techniques to make the meetings go faster and also be more productive. Um, so, the when we're doing a project meeting, I think we've all been there where the projects uh, don't, you end up walking away and not having any decisions made from a project or from a meeting, or you end up having the same meeting over and over and over again. And now on top of it, everybody's distributed. So it makes it, I think, even harder to get group consensus because not everybody is in the same room and you don't have that physical presence to come to conclusions and then have people walk away feeling satisfied there. So some of the benefits of what I'm going to show you is that it's fast. We got our process down to 2 to 2.5 hours, which seems like a lot when you say it like as 150 minutes, but in reality is if you have um, a couple of meetings, you've got not only 2 hours of meetings there, plus you got travel time, people getting set up, all that other stuff. And so I think this strategy process that we've got here has several benefits. It's really fast. The pace of it is, keeps people engaged and focused. Like I said, it'll save time. Um, Previously, when people were traveling to meetings, it definitely saved time because you're taking weekly meetings and you're kind of compressing them into one meeting. Um, so, it saved time there. And then at the end of it, this process also gives actionable items. So, um, when it's all said and done, there'll be everybody who is a stakeholder will understand, where the project is headed. There'll be people who have takeaways, so they know exactly what needs to do, and they'll have made that commitment in front of other people, which helps hold them to it. During this presentation, we're going to cover up, or cover, we're going to uncover the process that we use here to bubble up your ideas, or bubble up the group's ideas. Um, I'll show you what tools you can use to do a remote strategy session. And then there'll be a little demonstration and a couple of videos to show you how it works in practice here. Um, like I said, this is just a little background of this process. This not only is this like my experience with running a strategy session, but there's Google Ventures has this book called Sprint, and their sprint process is their design process that they have, and it takes about 5 days with several different steps along the way. And so, like I said, we've shrunk this down so it's a couple of hours. We get a lot of you know good work out of this 2 hours rather than it taking 5 days. Their process has more to do around product development, but obviously Google does software too. So there's a lot of good tips and nuggets in that book. Um, so I would suggest you read that if you're interested in how Google does it there. There's another group called AJ and Smart that they do product design, and they um, have a very similar process to what we have going on here. I'm just going to play this video so you can get um, hear it from another person and how they use this process here. So let me know if you can't hear the video.
This exercise that I'm going to show you is basically a way to cut out the useless, unstructured conversation that usually happens in all kinds of meetings that you've ever been to. This can be designing a new product, designing new features for a product, trying to come up with solutions to a problem that you're having with a product, trying to solve problems within a team in a company, actually pretty much any problem you can possibly imagine, this exercise can solve in a very, very quick way and very structured way.
So, they use it there too for something that's very similar to what we do for our web projects and software projects there. The process is a little bit different, but you can get some of the benefits from AJ and Smart and why they use this process as well. So I'm just going to jump right into what we call the process. It's it's pretty simple. It's just a bunch of steps that we go through over the 2.5 hours. They get people to the end where we've got some final decisions that have been made and an understanding of the problem that we're trying to tackle here. So it's pretty easy once you get the hang of it. You start out with introductions, like introduce yourself, and that you're the facilitator or moderator. Ask everybody in the room to identify who they are and what their role is, so that one, it creates personal contact with the people in the room, but it also gives you an understanding of who the stakeholders are in the room. That maybe if you have a single contact that you're working with initially, that you may not get that broad view of who is participating there. Okay. So then the next step is the why. Why are we doing this project? The next step then after that is the personas and audiences. Well, and that's where you discuss who you're doing the project for. Then we talk about the site or project goals, and then eventually we'll tie those all this together. But then the next piece is the functionality. So what does the project need to do? And then maybe things like that are not visible on the surface. There's the user experience, where you want to get somebody to purchase or sign up for an ebook. But then there may be something on the back end that somebody who may be more technical, or maybe say a marketing manager or something that they have their own needs that they need the site to do, that isn't just for necessarily the customer. So more like the business needs, like whether it needs to tie into a CRM, or some other follow-up list, or send somebody it needs to talk to the inventory system or something like that. So that's kind of the back end piece of it that gets discussed during the process here. Now then you get into a little bit of the meatier stuff here. I mean, it's all meaty, but this is the part that is really talks to the risk piece of doing a project. Like, what are the things that are going to keep this project from being successful? Is it that everybody is suddenly going to have to work remote, or something like that, or we are all working remote, that kind of thing? And how then that gets actually to the next step, is the solution. So how are you going to overcome those challenges? So everybody's working remote. How are we going to say, for example, have a remote strategy session or a strategy session? Well, we'll have to take it remote. So it's that idea of like, what are we going to do to tackle the challenges that come up and things that may make a project fail. When we do the challenges and the solutions, then we develop what's called a risk matrix. And so those are the pieces that are not quite as firm. They're the pieces that may there's a higher chance that a task or a solution may go over budget because it's unknown. There could be some sort of technical piece or infrastructure, like say the example I can think of is that the unemployment system in I think it's Pennsylvania or out east is using COBOL. There's a risk there that they may not be able to find COBOL developers, for example. So basically it just points out places that a little like gooey or have a, may really affect the scope of the project or the solutions that you come up with as a team. So just as a way to, like, as part of risk management, to be a little forward looking and, identify the pieces that are going to be toughest or that need to really have an eye kept on, to make sure that they don't um, torpedo the whole project or something like that. And this is the next um, thing that we do is an effort impact matrix. And this is not always something that we do as part of a project. Um, we use this on our own internal processes. So we'll get the whole team, the whole development staff together and talk about ways to improve our own internal processes. And as part of that, we go through a, a pared down version of this where we have everybody put together their ideas, and then we have effort impact matrix, it's called, and I'll show you that in a little bit. That says, like, these are the low hanging fruit. Like, they'll have the biggest impact. They're easy to do, and so let's take those um, and handle those first. And then some of the other things we may either put in the parking lot and say, we're going to do this over sometime over the next few months. And then other things may just be high effort, low impact, and just not worth doing. So that's what the effort impact matrix does. When we're doing a big web project, we typically don't do that. We may do that for pieces of a project, or if there are budget constraints around certain pieces of the project, that's when we'll do an effort impact matrix, just so that we can really have, for the amount of effort that's put in, we get, the most bang for our buck on that one. Then at the end of all of that, so that takes about not quite 2 hours. At the end of it, that's when we just kind of wrap up the whole process and say to the room what everybody is committed to, and so that everybody hears it. And again, it's a verbal commitment that everybody hears, so that you can be held responsible for that, and you know everybody knows what to expect after the 2.5 hours is up. So um, this is the agenda. This is what it looks like. It's really, really quick. Like, none of these things take more than 15 minutes. And this is the agenda that we try and stick to. At times, if there may be a little bit more discussion about the solutions or the challenges, that sort of thing. And it also varies on the number of people that are in the room as well. So this agenda flexes a little bit, but we try and stick as close as possible to this to make sure that we can get through everything. And we always follow up at the very end with commitments. Like, that absolutely is not something that gets skipped. Even if you have to do this, say, in 2 meetings because of availability, although I don't recommend it because it kind of breaks up the flow of it. But if you do that, then there's always the commitments at the end of each of those. So, the room hears it. I'm going to send an email with all our notes, whatever is going to happen. People understand what the next follow-up is going to be for this project. So I have this listed as 2 hours to 2 hours and 20 minutes, only because the effort impact matrix, whether you do that or don't do that, that'll affect how much time you spend together. But in general, when you're scheduling one of these, like, you should find a 2.5 hour block, and then you can take a break in the middle. We often take breaks for people to go get coffee, glass of water, use the bathrooms, that sort of thing. So then the things that you need when you're going to do one of these, we're starting to get into the tools here. Because we're doing this remote, and remote doesn't have to be just because of COVID. It could be because you have stakeholders all over the country, all over the world. We've done this with people in New Zealand on aspects of projects, but you need a conferencing tool. Obviously, everybody's got one now, but
Hey, Vince.
Like Zoom, Hangout, Skype. Yeah.
I just want to point out to people real quick that these are the things you need to run a remote strategy session. And if you can almost picture in your head, you saw AJ and Smart, is that his name? The video. You may have noticed that he was standing in front of a wall of Post-its. So we're
Yeah.
sort of replicating that experience digitally, and Vince will
Mhm.
talk about those tools. But while Vince is going through this, try and picture what it would be like, in real life,
Yeah.
and then note how these digital tools are sort of replicating that experience. So the conferencing tool is essentially your conference room. And
Right.
then we'll go through kind of the remote part of it, but you'll see how it doesn't really deviate in terms of what gets accomplished that dramatically from when you're in person.
Yeah, and actually, AJ and Smart, they also have a video of them doing it physically. So I have just a clip of that, so you get an idea of like the pacing, um, of how this works in the real world. And like Aaron said, we do a similar process to them that I'm going to show you, but we also have taken it to do it remotely, so you're not tied down to a physical location. But I will show a video of um, you know, some of the steps that are coming up here that you just saw in the last couple of slides. Here. Okay, so the other thing you need, and this is what Aaron was just talking about, is a virtual like post-it board. It's basically, it replaces like your whiteboard or your wall where people would put up their ideas. We use a software called Stormboard, which I'll show you some screenshots of that. There's another product called Retrium that we've assessed, which is has a it walks people through the steps a little bit more directly. Like, this is the idea step. Okay, this is the grouping step. This is the voting step, and then um, at the end, you know, that's where it all wraps up. So each of those steps. We also have, I'll show you some examples of this. You can either use Google Drawing or PowerPoint online, something where people can collaborate. That's really the whole idea of this, is that people have to be able to collaborate online. If I have an example of that I can walk you through, or you can do it with like Google Sheets or Excel, which I also have an example of that for people to take a look at. So, you don't necessarily need a paid product like we use, but there are some other ways that you can do it with tools that you might already have or software you already have. It's Stormboard and Retrium have some cool features that make it a lot easier for us to set things up. There, you need a timer, so that's to keep track of where you are uh, during the meeting. Like, okay, we're going to spend 5 minutes of setting up um, or writing down your ideas. Okay, then you set a timer again and say, okay, we're going to spend the next like 3 minutes, voting on these ideas or something like that. So it's a timer that because we're using a screen share, oftentimes with Zoom, people can see, or at least then you as the moderator can say, we've got 1 minute left in this step. Okay, I'm going to start the timer. Is everybody ready? Go. And then it's just a way to keep the pace going and make things happen quickly and prevent the meeting from turning into a half day or a full day meeting there. So then the other thing is we have a risk matrix template that we use. It's just nice to have ahead of time. So I always bring that along, and then along with an impact effort matrix. If you're going to do one of those during the course of your meeting. The other thing that we start with is, it sounds a little funny, but before the meeting starts, we have an idea of the commitments that we want to have at the end. So oftentimes as part of our process, we go through all this, and then we typically send out screenshots or notes, or we have reports that we can export and send to people. Or if you've had conversations with your stakeholders and that you're going to have to get a hold of somebody later, just have an idea of where you want the meeting to end up. It may not entirely end up there, but they're the kinds of things that you know you're going to have to produce after the session comes to an end, so that you're not at the end of the meeting and then making decisions about, well, what are we going to do next, or what needs to happen now, and then have a long discussion about that. Like as the person who's facilitating this meeting or running the project, it helps to have an idea of what you want to produce at the end. Even though that may change a little bit, it may help you steer some of the conversations as well.
I want to jump in right there with what you just said, Vince, because the moderator role, as you can all see right now, is so critical to the success of implementing this methodology. So, for example, the timer keeps you on track. It's also sort of an objective tool that the moderator can use to reinforce their role as the one really driving the process. And likewise, having an idea of outcomes when you come in, because you're really you're facilitating the experience, but it's up to you to move things along and to really follow the process. So I just want to point that out, because I think maybe Vince doesn't want to take enough credit for all the good work he does when he's running these meetings, but it really is important to have a moderator that is driving the whole experience.
Yeah, and um, one of the things that we do in person, which is a little bit different when we're doing this remotely, is that we typically send two people. We have the person who's the project management lead, which lots of times is myself, but we also bring another project manager with us, or an additional person, because if it gives me an opportunity to continue to lead the meeting while some of the other things are going on, and that person may, they may be watching the timer. They also maybe, if we are in the real world, or together physically, collect post-its or group post-its together during the process, just so that the person who's leading the meeting or is the main facilitator can focus on the people in the room and their ideas, rather than taking time away from the process or from going through this exercise to put post-its up and group it together. So that's something that's helpful. It's a little bit tougher to do online, because then you might have two captains trying to drive the online tool, but you may find that it's helpful as you're running these to bring in a second person. It's also great to have a second set of ears in the room, just to make sure that everybody heard the same thing, because this, like I said, this meeting goes really fast, and there's a lot going on, and people get really busy and engaged. So it's always good just to have somebody who's sitting just a little bit outside of that process, who's assisting with the meeting there. A lesson that we learned, actually Jenny was there, we found that some music helps fill in some of the silence. It's a little strange to say that having something else happening is less distracting, but it does kind of tune out a lot of the other things, or other, everyday distractions that happen. So, and it kind of covers that uncomfortable silence where you have a room full of people who are not saying anything. It's almost like when you're taking a test, right? And so this is not supposed to be a painful process. So, something playing in the background. I think we were fooling around with, the Jeopardy theme song, which adds a little bit of pressure. I've been in sessions where people have played like video game music, just something a little quiet in the background, that so that people are not, feeling that the pressure of the silence there. So that's just something else that I think is really nice to have when you're running these sessions there. So those are the tools that you need. I already ran through the whole process here. We've actually broken the process down into like something that's repeatable. It gives the meeting a rhythm, and it gets a lot of the ideas out quickly and fast. And then we do it over and over and over again, so that you're not having to teach somebody something new each time you go through one of these steps. And it does pull out ideas really fast. So I've got this is the video again. AJ and Smart. This is them doing it physically. They have much better video production facilities than I have in my at-home office here. But I'm just going to show you what this process looks like in a physical environment, and then show you how we're doing it in a virtual environment here. So let's give you some real-world context here. So let's pop
Shut off if they start talking.
it. Okay.
The moderator gives everybody Post-its and a Sharpie. Gives them 7 minutes, and you're going to get each person to write as many problems or challenges they see in general. Everybody in the team, they're all going to be writing down the challenges they have, and the moderator, once the timer is up, is going to tell them to stop. All right, guys, so you can stop now. So each person is going to have whatever, like 15 to 20 at the end. So I'm just going to write one example here to show you. So we're working on improving a design team here. And one of the problems that came up in one of these exercises was that we realized a lot of people actually don't know what's happening on other projects that they're not working on and start to feel left out. So this could be one example. Let's do one more. So here's another problem that's even slightly related to the other one. This app that we're working on, the project never ends. It's starting to get boring, starting to get even a little bit stressful with the time. So this could be one problem that comes out of it. The next step is very, very simple. The moderator is going to call each person out one by one, and all they're going to do is take their pile of problems, stick them on one by one, and they're going to explain very quickly to the group, like maximum 30 seconds per post-it, what is this problem about. So they're just going to say, this Rain X app, I feel like it's getting really stressful. It feels like it's going on for months. This is really, really annoying me. So this is a challenge that this person has. Remember, these problems and challenges can be anything at all. You just have the general topic in the group to start off with. So let's use this one as an example and move on to the next step. Woo! Okay, so the next step is very simple. The moderator is going to give each person in the team 2 dots. You can't see my fingers. 2 dots. It's as simple as this. Get the dots, cut them out, bloop, 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 and give everybody, including the moderator himself, in this case, if he's actually taking part of it, 2 dots. And everybody's going to silently, very important, silently, without discussing the problems, vote on the biggest problems that they are maybe having in the team right now. Rules for the voting: you can put 2 dots on one post-it if you think it's the most important. You can also put dots on your own. That's no problem. That's it. The moderator is going to go up to the surface, look at the voted problems, and just put them in order of priority. This shouldn't take more than a few seconds. They're just putting them in order of the votes, and you can ignore the ones. The ones are not important. We have enough things to throw the ones away. Whatever. So in the end, you're going to have something like this. Might we are basic.
All right, so there's a couple of things that they're doing there that we have that differ from the way we do things. So typically, we don't have everybody get up and explain each of their problems for up to 30 seconds. In particular, when we're doing a web project, because there's so much going on. We'll group things together and talk about them if the room is feeling like they don't understand what the post says. So that's one of the differences. Another difference is that we may adjust the number of votes. Typically, we do 3 versus doing only 2, or they use it a little bit later in the process. They use 6 for voting. We stick with the 3. So there just are a few differences there. We also don't chuck the ones. We put the ones maybe lower, well, definitely lower, but we don't lose the ones. And that's one of the nice things about doing these remotely, is that you don't end up with a pile of Post-its on the floor that you have to pick through. You actually can still see what those ideas were, and the people know that they've been heard and that what some of the other ideas are that people had, but they just get moved farther down the priority list there. So that's how it works in the physical real world. You write Post-it, you put them up, group them, vote, and then you start over again. So it's basically, we do that for the first, well, except for introductions. I mean, from steps 2 through 6, no, 7. we go through them over and over and over again. Now, the solutions piece here, I have a dotted line, and that's because that's where that leads to a lot more discussion. We don't just vote and then group and then be done like that. That's part of the process where we actually have some discussions about the solutions there. So it's not quite the same, but it's close enough that we don't just move on to the next item. Okay, so this next video, we use Stormboard, like I said, for our remote strategy sessions. And so this is a video just of what Stormboard looks like, and you can see how it correlates with the physical world with the idea of Post-its and grouping things together here. So there's no sound on this video. So we were building a peanut butter sandwich. That was what our internal project was for the day when we were doing this. So we're not building a jelly website or a peanut butter website. We were going through this process to build a peanut butter and jelly sandwich was the initial project that we started with. So Stormboard has this thing called rapid fire where you just type and hit enter, type and hit enter, type and hit enter. Fast forward a little bit through some of these here. Okay, so now you can see that we've got all of our Post-its that we've put together of everybody's ideas. So we're just kind of, because of the way the software works, it just piles them up. So we're just spreading them out. This, you saw the little pop-up there that we could vote on it if we wanted to, but we're actually going to create what's called an index card, and that's Stormboard's idea of grouping there. And then we have people vote on the groups or the individual Post-its that have been put together or put on the board. Same slide. Here's what our risk matrix looks like. So if some of the solutions that we come up during that step in the process, we put those on this board or make copies of them so that we can understand, like I said, what is high risk, high effort, low risk, low effort. So we can just see where either things are going to be harder to do or just things that really we need to keep in mind, or we may need to assess as the project is going along, whether it's budget or something else there. And this is an example of the impact effort matrix. We've got high effort, high benefit, low benefit, low effort, and ideally the things that you want to do will be up here in the upper left corner. So you could say, okay, oh, I'm sorry, upper right corner again, high effort, high benefit. So sorry, I'm reading this all again. So I'm sorry, you want low effort, high benefit. That's the ideal here. So apologies for that little tongue tripping there. But you want to, the idea is that you identify things that don't take a lot of effort, but are going to benefit either the team or the project itself there.
I just want to check on time.
Yep.
So, yep, we're at 12:45. So let's take a look at what we have here, and then I want to make sure we have a few, just a minute or two for questions if there are any. Go ahead and tell us about the board. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So this, you saw our peanut butter strategy just where we were making the Post-its. This is actually what our storm board looks like at the end, where we've got each step, each column here is a step in the process. It correlates to the agenda items that you saw in the earlier slides, and then our individual process where we're writing, grouping, voting, and then talking about the votes, and then starting over again. So you can see how we did this. We didn't do an impact, I'm sorry, effort benefit or impact analysis on this one, but you can see we went all the way through the risk matrix here. So we understood, I think the riskiest thing was training other people how to make peanut butter and jelly sandwiches there. Skip that slide. Okay, so I think the PB&J, this is our tools Stormboard. I'm going to get into the tools now. This is what Stormboard looks like, and you saw a demonstration of how we use that. Some of the other tools that we're using, this is an example, well, we're not using these, but those are things that you can use and how it might look. This is Google Sheets. It's people put their ideas in the idea column together, so that replicates the Post-it notes. Then everybody gets their votes or stickers for the ideas that they want to vote on or what they think is important. And then in the end, the spreadsheet tallies the votes so that everybody can see what was important there. And real quick here, this is the PowerPoint version of this process. We go ahead and create a whole bunch of Post-it notes on the left here ahead of time so people can just fill them in. Then they put all their ideas out on the board. And then we've got stickers that we've put together on the right of their 3 stickers so then people can vote on their ideas. So again, this is not using software as a service or any sort of desktop application other than Microsoft PowerPoint there. So in the end, just to wrap things up here, there's a few links of things that I've shown you over the past 45 minutes. Sprint, that's the book. AJ and Smart, that's their YouTube channel that you can look and check out all of their videos. Their Stormboard, that's the software that we use. Retrium, that's the other software that you could use. You may want to take a look at. I put in the Google Chrome extension that I use for timing. And then, of course, a link to our site where you can reach out to us there. So
great. And you know what, Vince, I can email that out to people too.
Yeah,
so that's good that we have that. I can send that list of resources. Thank you everyone so much for walking through this process with us. What Vince has just done with you is, if you'll see here, this is how we work as an organization at Earthling Interactive. We have basically a 3-part engagement that we do with our clients. We do a strategy and evaluation. You got a taste of what the first part of that is. Those are those strategy sessions. That's where we plan what we're going to do and how we're going to execute it. Again, making sure that we remain aligned on those expectations. That's what we do with the first part. The second part is the implementation. And so the implementation is what you traditionally think about app or website building, and that's the coding, that's the programming part of the work that we do. We have about 15 to 20 coders, depending on what the project is. We can grow and shrink. We're mostly all here in Madison, and we are a development firm with project managers, and those project managers are the individuals who help lead you through this process, and while the coders are building the actual product. Then when it's done, we launch it and we do maintenance. And that maintenance is an easy to overlook part of the projects that we do, but it's very important because, as you know, the internet is a very risky place to be, and you need some folks to help take care and do the care and feeding and security of your website or your web product. So I just wanted to quickly go through the 3 basic pieces of how we work at Earthling and how folks work with us, and how what Vince just walked you through fits into our entire the process of how we work. Before we get going, we went a little over, and I'm going to apologize for that, but I definitely want to accept some questions if anybody has questions. Any questions today? All right. Well, great. Thank you so much again for attending the webinar. And I'll be emailing those links to you and staying in touch. And then if something does come up, feel free to ask me then. And have a really great day. Thank you all.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.